Started. Can't tell if the music on, honestly. All right, let's get started. Who we got here? All right, the story of the colors. October 1994. Old Don Antonio points at the macaw crossing the afternoon sky. Look, he says, I see this burning streak of colors on the gray mist that foreshadows a rainstorm. It doesn't seem real. So many colors, or just one bird? I say on reaching the hilltops, old Don Antonio is sitting on a little knoll above the mud that has taken over this main path. He catches his breath while he rolls a new cigarette. I walk a few steps farther on and realize that he stayed behind. I go back and sit beside him. Do you think we'll get to the town before it starts raining? I ask him, lighting up my pipe. Don Antonio doesn't seem to hear me. Now a flock of toucans has caught his eye. In his hand, the cigarette waits for a flame to commence its slow, smoky drawing. He clears his throat, lights the cigarette, and gets comfortable to begin slowly. The story of the colors. The macaw wasn't always like that. It barely had color. It was gray all over and had stubby little feathers, like a wet chicken's. It was just one more of the many birds that came to the world. Nobody knows how, because even the gods didn't know who made them. That's just how it was. The gods woke up after the night, said, "This is far enough," to the day, and the men and women were sleeping or making love, which is a beautiful way to grow tired to sleep well. The gods were fighting. These gods were always fighting because they were very quarrelsome. Not like the first ones, the seven gods who gave birth to the world. And the gods were fighting because the world was very boring, painting in just two colors. And their anger was just because only two colors shared in the world. One was black, sent by the night, and the other was white, that walks by day. There was a third that wasn't really a color. It was the gray that paints dusk and dawn, so the black and white won't bump up against each other. So these gods were quarrelsome, but they were also wise. They had a meeting, and they decided to make more colors, so that walking and making love would be more pleasurable for the Batman and women. One of these gods began walking in order to think his thoughts better. He thought his thoughts so hard that he didn't look where he was going. He tripped on a rock that was so big, he banged his head and blood poured out. After swearing and shouting for quite a while, he saw his blood and noticed that it was different from the other two colors. He ran to where the other gods were and showed them the new color, and they named it red, the third color to be born. Later, another god was looking for a color for painting hope. He found it, even though it took a while, and went to show it to the assembly of gods. They named the color green, the fourth to be born. Another one started digging deep in the earth. "What are you doing?" the other gods asked him. "I am looking for the earth's heart," he replied, throwing dirt all over the place. Soon he came upon the earth's heart and showed it to the other gods. They named this fifth color brown. Another god went straight up, as high as he could. "I am going to see what color the world is," he said, and he climbed and he climbed. When he was quite high up, he looked down and saw the color of the world, but he didn't know how to bring it back down to where the other gods were. He just kept looking for it for the longest time until he grew blind with looking, because by then the color of the world was stuck in his eyes. He got down as best he could, tripping all the way, and went where the assembly of gods was and told them, I'm carrying the color of the world in my eyes. They called the sixth color blue. Another god was looking for colors when he heard a child laugh. Quietly he drew closer, and then the child wasn't paying attention. When the child wasn't paying attention, in the flashing second, he snatched the child's smile away and left him crying. That's why they say children can be laughing one second and crying the next, because of how suddenly the god stole the child's laugh. And the god took away the child's smile, and they named the seventh color yellow. But then the gods were tired, so they went off to drink some Pzol, P-Z-O-L, and sleep, leaving the colors in the little box they threw beneath the ceiba tree. The little box wasn't shut very tight, so the colors got out and began to play and make love to each other. The different and new colors appeared. The ceiba tree looked at them all and sheltered them so the rain couldn't wash all the colors away. When the god came back, they were no longer just 7 colors, but many more. The gods looked at the ceiba tree and said, "You gave birth to the colors? You will take care of the world, and from your crown you will paint the world." They climbed to the top of the ceiba tree, and from there they began flinging the colors all around, just like that. Blue stuck partly to the sky and partly to the water. The green fell on the trees and plants. The brown, which was heavier, fell on the earth. And the yellow, that was the child's laugh, flew all the way up to paint the sun. The red dropped into people's and animals' mouths, who ate it, so it painted the inside of their mouths red. And the black and white were already in the world. The way the gods were tossing around the colors, not even looking where they were throwing them, made a real mess. Some colors splashed on people, and that's why people are different colors and think differently. After a while, the gods grew tired and wanted to go to bed again. These gods were like the first ones, the ones who gave birth to the world. These gods always wanted to sleep. So because they didn't want to forget the colors or lose sight of them, they looked for a way to keep them safe. And they were thinking about how to do that with all their hearts. When they saw a macaw, they grabbed it and began putting all the colors on it, having to stretch its feathers so all the colors would fit. And that's how the macaw got its colors. Now it strolls around and in case men and women forget that there are many colors and ways of thinking in the world, and how happy the world will be when all the colors and ways of thinking have a place. 88. Ooh, I hate that number. The Story of the Mirrors. June 9th through the 11th, 1995. I want you as a glass, never as a mirror. Pedro Salinas. May 1985. The moon looks into the mirror surface of the lake, and jealous with her waves, the lake wrinkles her face. Midway between the shore, we navigate in a dugout canoe, which is as stable as my resolve to cross this lake. Old Don Antonio has invited me to try out his dugout canoe. For 28 days between the new moon and the full moon, old Don Antonio has carved with a sharp-edged machete and an axe a long cedar log. The boat is 7 meters long. He explains to me that the dugout canoe can be made from cedar, cowbo, Hona Castle, or Bari, and points out each type of tree to me. He is bent on showing me each tree, but I cannot tell the difference. To me, all trees are tall. But that was during the day. Now it is dawn, as law dictates, and we are rowing in this little cedar wood boat that old Don Antonio has named a malcontent. Named the malcontent. Quote, in honor of the moon, says Don Antonio, while rowing with a long and narrow pole. We are in the middle of the lake, like the comb, and the wind curls the waves on the water, and the canoe sways up and down. Old Don Antonio says we must wait for the wind to settle down and lets the boat drift. And, okay, quote, any one of these waves can capsize the canoe, he says, while with his burning cigarette, he makes the smoke spiral like waves into the wind. With the light of the full moon, one can make out in the distance the large islet that dots Lake Miramar from a spiral of smoke. Old Don Antonio beckons an old story. I am more worried about capsizing. I am still caught between being nauseous and being terrified. So I am in no mood for stories. Apparently my state does not concern old Don Antonio. Lying on the bottom of the canoe, he begins to recount the story of the mirrors. The most of the ancients says that the moon was born right here in the jungle. They say that many worlds ago, the gods had fallen asleep, tired from so much play and so much doing. It was quiet, but a low whimpering started to come from the mountains. It turns out that the gods had left a lake forgotten in the middle of the mountain. When they parceled out those things belonging to the earth, it appears that this small lake was left over. Not knowing what to do with it, they left her stranded among peaks so high that no one ventured there. And so the little lake was crying because she was alone. And as she was crying, the mother Seba, she who sustains the world, her heart was saddened by the lake's crying. Lifting up her white skirt, the Seba went to the little lake. Well, what's the matter? The Seba asked. The bit of water, which now was just a little puddle after much crying. I don't want to be alone, said the little lake. Then I will stay here by your side, said the Seba, she who sustains the world. I don't want you to stay here, said the little lake. Then I'll take you with me, said the Seba. I don't want to be down here, stuck to the earth. I want to be up high, like you, said the little lake. Hold on. Then I will lift you with my head, but only for a bit. The wind is very ill-humored and could blow you away, said the Seba. And it's Ceiba, so everybody know. And doing what she could, Mother Seba gathered up her skirts and bent down to lift the little lake into her arms. Carefully, since she was a mother, she placed the little lake upon the crown of her head. Slowly, the mother Seba stood up again, making sure that not one drop of water should spill from the little lake. Because Mother Seba could see that the little lake was very shallow. When the little lake was finally up high, she exclaimed, "It's really great up here. Take me to see the world. I want to see everything. The world is too large, my girl, and you can fall from up there," said the Seba. "I don't care. Take me." Insisted the little lake, and she made like she was going to cry again. Mother Seba did not want the little lake to cry, so she started to walk, holding herself very straight with a little lake on her head. Ever since then, women have learned to walk with water jugs up on their heads without spilling a drop, like Mother Seba. And the woman from the jungle walked high when they bring water from the stream, straight back, head up, and step like a summer cloud. That's how a woman walks when she carries up top the soothing water. Mother Saba was a good walker, for in those days the trees did not stand still, but moved from place to place, having children, filling the world with trees. But the wind was hanging around, bored and whistling. When he saw Mother Saba, he wanted to play and lift her skirt with the swing of his hand. But Saba got angry and told him, "Be silent, wind. Can't you see I'm carrying on my head a crying and willful little lake?" Then the wind looked up and saw the little lake peering from above, nestled in the Saba's crown on wavy hair. And he saw she was pretty and thought to make her fall in love with him. And so the wind went up to the Saba's head and started whispering sweet words into the little lake's ear. Flattering, the little lake said to the wind, "If you are taking me around the world, I will go with you." The wind didn't have to think twice about it. With some clouds, he made himself a horse and went off with the little lake sitting behind him. All this happened so fast that Mother Saba never noticed that the little lake was no longer on her head. For a long while, the little lake traveled with the wind. The wind would tell the little lake how good looking she was. Who wouldn't be satisfied to drink her water? One could go deep into her. The wind would say to the little lake, hoping to convince her to make love with him in the corner of some early dawn. The little lake believed everything the wind said to her, and each time they would fly above the puddle or a lake, the little lake wouldn't miss the chance to look at her reflection, and she wouldn't fuss with her wet hair, gazed with her liquid eyes, making flirtatious faces with small waves on her round face. But what the little lake wanted was to go from place to place. She wanted nothing to do with a little corner of dawn and making love, and it seemed like the wind was offended. He took her high up and made the horse buck, sending the little lake into the fall. And because she was up so high, it took a long time for the little lake to fall. And certainly she would have taken a good thump if it weren't not for some stars who saw that she was falling and as best as they could fastened the little lake to their pointy arms. 7 stars held her by her sides like the sheet and once again lifted her to the sky. The little lake was very pale from the fright of her fall, and since she did not want to go back down to the earth, she asked the stars if she could stay with them. "All right," said the stars, "but you'll have to go back whenever we go." "Yes," agreed the little lake, "I will go with you." But the little lake became sad, always going to the same places, and she began her crying again. And the gods woke up with the crying and went to see what was going on, and they saw the little lake being pulled by 7 stars across the night. When they heard her story, they were angered because they had not made the lakes to hang around in the skies, but to be on earth. They went to the little lake and said, "You will no longer be a lake. Lakes don't live in the sky, but since we can't lower you down again, you must remain here. Now your name will be Moon, and for being flirtatious and conceited, your punishment will be to reflect forever the well in which the earth's light is kept." And it turns out the gods had put away the light inside the earth and had made a deep round hole so that the stars could come and drink when their light and spirits went out. And so the moon has no light, but it is a mirror. When she appears full, she reflects the large hole with light where the stars come to drink. The mirror is light. That is the moon. That is why when the moon strolls over a lake, the mirror looks at itself. In the mirror had no matter what, the moon is never happy or sad. She is malcontent. Mother Saba was also punished by the gods for all her pampering. She was forbidden to walk, so she would not go from place to place, and they made her carry the world, and they made her skin thicker, so she would not feel sorry when she heard crying around her. Ever since then, with the skin as hard as stone, Mother Cebes stands without moving. If she were to walk even a little bit, the world would fall down. And that's how it was, said old Aunt Don Antonio. Ever since then, the moon reflects the light that is kept inside the earth. That is why when she finds a lake, the moon stops to make her face a fix and fix her hair. That is also why when women see a mirror, they stop and look at themselves. And it was a gift from the gods, which women was given a little piece of the moon, so she could fix her hair and makeup, her face, so she wouldn't want to journey and lift herself up to the skies. The story ended, but when the wind hasn't let up, the waves still threaten the little boat. But I say nothing. And it's not because I am thinking about old Don Antonio's words, but because I am sure that if I open my mouth, I will throw up, perhaps even my liver, into the agitated mirror where the moon rehashes her conquentries. 89. The Story of Dreams. December 1995. Just real quick, who's in the request? All right. No one's in the request. Okay. P.S. To teach is the same as to struggle. Old Don Antonio was sharpening his machete and smoking in the doorway of his cabin. I was sleeping at his side, blanketed by exhaustion and the chirping of crickets. And just like 10 years before and 10 years after the sharping edge smoke from Don Antonio's cigarette, the sky was a night sea, so enormous that you couldn't see it begin or end. The moon had appeared a few moments earlier. A cloud of light marked the crest of the hill that would be the balcony of a silver-plated concord tree. Let me make sure I got this word right. Hold on, everybody. It's coquetry, a flirtatious behavior, and springboard for a clean heart thrust. The platform for a night maiden voyage, a golden blade barely wrinkled with the expectant valley. Then there was a road of gold turning to silver, turning to mother of pearl. Then the mended sail filled and bellowed upward. The night sailed past. Below silence, the nostalgia awaited. December 19th, 1985, 1995. The sea ever opened westward. It wasn't raining, but the cold dampened our clothes and seeped into the in quiet dreams of the restless sleep of slow asphyxiation. Out of the corner of his eyes, old Don Antonio saw I was awake and asked me, "What did you drink?" "Nothing," I answer, looking for my pipe and tobacco in the cartridge belt. That's no good. You dream and you get to know yourself, came his reply as a return to the slow caress of file against the metal-plated tongue. What's no good about it?" I asked, lighting my pipe. Old Don Antonio stopped working and after checking the edge, set down set down the machete. With his hands and lips, he started up a cigarette and a story. Here it is, the story of dreams. No one told me what I'm going to tell you. Well, my grandfather told me, but he said I wouldn't understand it until I dreamed it myself. So, I am going to tell you the story I dreamed, not the story my grandfather told me. Don Antonio stretches out his legs and rubs his tired knees. He lets out a bellow of smoke that obscures the moon's reflection on the steel leaf resting on his lap. He continues, in every wrinkle on the faces of a great grandparent, our gods go on living and waiting. The old times reach down to us. It's through time that our ancestors' reasons reach us. The great gods speak through the eldest elders, and we listen. When the clouds cover the earth, barely clinging to the hills with their little hands, the first gods come down to play with men and women and teach them the truth. We don't always recognize them because they're wearing the faces of the night and the clouds. We dream dreams to make ourselves better. It's through dreams that the first gods speak to us and teach us. The man who doesn't know how to dream is terribly alone and has to hide his ignorance in fear. The first gods taught the men and women of Corn to dream so they could speak, so they could know and be known, and they gave them manuals to walk with them throughout their lives. The NAHAULS Nahuls of the true men and women are the jaguar, the eagle, and the coyote. The jaguar is the jaguar to fight, the eagle to give flight to dreams, and the coyote to be able to think and to see through the lies of the powerful. In the world of the first gods, of those who made the world, everything is dream. The earth where we live and die is a great mirror of the dream in which the gods live. The great gods all live together. Birds live with them. No one is above or below. It's the injustice governments create that disorder the world and sets a few above, many below. The world isn't naturally like this. The true world, the great mirror of the dream of the first gods, those who gave birth to the world, is very big and everyone is free as a bird. It's not like the world isn't now shrunk so that a few can be above the many below. Not now. The world is flawed. It doesn't reflect the dream world where the first gods live. That's why the gods gave the men of Corn a mirror called dignity, and in it men are equal and rebel. If they are not equal, that's rebel. If they're not equal, yeah. That's why our first grandparents rebelled, and that's why they died inside us today, so that we may live. The mirror of dignity destroys the demon who deals with darkness. Seen in the mirror, the Lord of Darkness reflects the nothingness from which he made. Being nothing, he melts into nothingness before the mirror of dignity. The Lord of Darkness, the divider of the world. The gods made 4 points upon which to lay the world, not because they were tired, and also that men and women could walk as free as birds, so that everyone could work together, and so no one could be set above anyone else. The gods made 2 more points for flying and walking on the earth, and the gods made another point from which the true men and women could set out walking. 7 points given sense to the world and purpose to the true men and women. Ahead and behind, one side and the other, above and below. And the 7th is the path we dream, the destination of men and women of Corn, the true ones. The gods put a moon in the breast of the mother. to feed the dream of a new men and women in whom history and memory live. Without them, death and oblivion feast. The earth, our great mother, has two breasts so that men and women can learn to dream. Learning to dream, they learn to grow. Finding dignity, they learn to struggle. That is why when the true men and women say, we're going to dream, it means we're going to struggle. Old Don Antonio fell silent. He fell silent and fell asleep. I dreamed that I am dreaming. I dreamed that I know. I dreamed that I understand. Above the moon's breast pour milk on the road of Santiago. The night was queen, and all was still to be made, to be dreamed, and to be struggled for. Else up packing memories and a field. 90. The story of the seven rainbows. Good stories. Trump just handed Canada to China. Okay. The story of the seven rainbows. January 7th, 1996. The evening was about to exhaust itself. There was a brilliant gray that also announced dawn. Old Don Antonio finished setting down 2 sacks of Pergamino coffee and sat next to me. I waited for the connection to help me cross from settlements where there was no compañeros. The crossing had to be by night. With dawn came January and 1986. It was still a time to be hidden, to conceal ourselves from those we would become a part of latter. I looked towards the west and fortressed behind the pipe smoke. I tried to dream of a different morning. Old Don Antonio remained silent and barely made the necessary noise to roll one of those cigarettes that announced smoke and stories. But old Don Antonio did not speak. He stayed there looking towards where I was looking and waited patiently for me to speak. Wait, when will we be behind from our people? Until when will we be Until when will we be hiding from our people? I said, while the last mouthful of smoke escaped from the bowl of the pipe. Don Antonio cleared his throat and decided finally to light the cigarette and the word, slowly like one who loosens hope. Old Don Antonio relight the evening with the story of the seven rainbows. In the very early beginning of the worlds, where later our oldest grandfathers walked, the greatest gods, those who gave birth to the world, the first came down to speak to the men and the women of corn. It was an evening, just like this cold blinking rain and sun. The first god sat to talk with the men and women of the corn, to agree on a path to be walked by the true men and women. Since these gods who gave birth to the world were not bossy like the gods who came later, they sought a good agreement with the men and women of the corn. They always sought to take a good path together, seeking agreement and good words. So this evening, which was one of the first of that very early world, the greatest gods were speaking with the men and women of corn, with their equals. They agreed to seek the accord with other men and women who spoke other languages and had other thoughts. The men and women of corn had to walk very far within their heart to seek the words that other men and women with other colors and other hearts would understand. So they came to agree on the work for the men and women of corn to make a good world. They agreed that 7 were the very first tasks. the most important to make us new. And the first 7 gods spoke, those who gave birth to the world, saying that 7 were the tasks that should be accomplished so that the world is made good, because 7 were the winds or the skies that gave shelter to the world. And as such, the first God said that these were the 7 skies. The 7th wind was, oh my gosh, here we go, Nanho Chayakyam, of the great father Chak, Chaac. The 6th was the wind of the Jacob, the gods of rain. The 5th wind was the Kalob, Kayaksabe, can't say it, Kayaksab, masters of the wilderness. The 4th wind was the guardians of animals. The 3rd wind was of bad spirits. The 2nd was the wind of the guardians of the crosses for the village of the Melpops. In the depths of the Kinsin, the god of tremor and fear, the devil. The first god was said that there were 7 colors, and 7 was the number used to count them. I have already told you the story of the colors, and later I will tell you the story of the 7 tasks. If there was time for you to listen and for me to tell it, old Don Antonio adds hurriedly, while the last glow of his cigarette is extinguished. Then comes the silence, in which Don Antonio conjures up more smoke and dreams. A small flashing light of the match in his hand, and the glowing reappears. So the men and women of Korn agreed to fulfill the 7 tasks, so that the world was made good. And they looked to where the sun and moon take turns to sleep, and asked the first gods how much they should walk in order to fulfill the 7 tasks that served to make the new world. So the first god said that 7 times 7, they would walk 7, because that is how the number came about, which reminds us that not everything comes in pairs, and that there is always room for other. So the men and women of Korn said good, and turned their gaze to the mountain, which was the small box where Mother Earth's breasts were held, taking turns one by day and the other by night. And in seeing this, the men and women of Korn asked themselves, how would they know how many times is 7 times 7, walking the number 7? And the first gods said that they did not know either, because they were the first gods, but they did not know everything, and they also had to study a lot. And that is why they would not leave, but remained with men and women of Korn, so that they would think together, and together find the path to make the world new. And so there they were. That is thinking themselves. That is knowing themselves. That is speaking themselves, learning themselves. That is being. When the rain hung right in the middle of the afternoon without falling or rising, was just there. And the men and women of Korn and the first gods looked and saw how the bridge of light and clouds began to paint itself, how the bridge came from the mountain to the valley. They could see clearly that the bridge of colors, clouds, and light did not go anywhere, nor did it come from anywhere, but it was just there, on top of the rain and the world. And they were happy, all of them who were thinking and knowing themselves, and they understood that it was good, this bridge for the good worlds to come and go, the new worlds that we make. And quickly the musician brought out their instruments, and quickly the first gods and the true men and women of Korn pulled out their feet, and they began to dance, because they had been thinking themselves and knowing themselves and speaking themselves and learning themselves. And now that they finished dancing, they met again and found that 7 times 7 meant that 7 rainbows with 7 colors had to be made by walking so that the 7 main tasks could be fulfilled. And it was also understood that after making the 7 rainbows, there would be 7 more, because the bridges of clouds, colors, and light do not come nor go. They have no beginning and no end. They do not start or stop, but continues to cross from one side to the other. And that is the agreement arrived at by the first gods and the men and women of Corn, the true ones. And ever since that afternoon of happiness and knowing, they spent their lives making bridges, and also making bridges of death. The bridges are always made of colors, of clouds, and of light, to go from one place to another, to the other, to carry out the task that give birth to the new world that makes us good 7 times 7, walking 7. The men and women of Corn are the true ones. Making bridges, they live. Making themselves bridges, they die. Old Don Antonio becomes quiet. I stare at him, and I am about to ask him what all this has to do with my question about how long will we be hiding. When the light catches his gaze, and smiling, he points west to the mountain. I turn around and see a rainbow that does not come nor go, that is just there, bridging worlds, bridging dreams. 91. The story of the noise and silence. Noise and silence. February 14th, 1997. It is raining heavily. The sea slept off the fatigue, a gift of lovemaking, and on the little cassette player, Mercedes Sosa was unreeling the song that goes, I thank life, it's given me so much. And it was dawn, and the airplane had already brandished death over the night dark mountains of the Mexican southeast. It was remembered Nefertiti Reyes and self-named Pablo Neruda when he said, may the hour come in a pure fullness of its own time, and may the people fill the empty streets with their fresh firm bodies. Here is my tenderness for then. You already know it. I bear no other flag. The clock was war red. The clock of war red. April 14th, 1997. 10 years earlier in 1987, it had been raining the same way, but then there was no sea, no tape recorder or airplane, but dawn was circling our guerrilla camps. Old Don Antonio had stayed to chat. He had come bringing in the evening and a sack of tostada. There was no one else but him and me in the camp kitchen, a pipe and a hand-rolled cigarette, veiled with the smoke coming from the embers of the fire. Even so, we could speak only by yelling. It seemed to be quiet, but the rain shredded every corner of the night, and there wasn't an disturbed place anywhere. The rain's noisy dripped from the roof of trees, cloaking the mountains, and more rain noise splashed from the ground. The noise from the rain was doubled. Below where there was the sound of tree-filtered rain from above, and there was the noise that squelched the ground. In the middle, there was another sound. There, where the plastic tarps we used for roofs were talking. The February rain in the jungle. Noise above, below, and in the middle. In the middle, there was no corner for a word. That's why I was surprised when I heard old Don Antonio's voice clearly. Without losing the rolled cigarettes on his lips, he began to tell a story. The story of the noise and silence. Once there was a time when time wasn't measured. During that time, the greatest gods, the ones who gave birth to the world, were walking the way gods do. Dancing, of course. There was a lot of noise during that time. Voices and yelling came from every direction. There was a lot of noise, and you couldn't understand any of it. And that noise was not meant for understanding anything, but not for understanding anything. But the first gods thought the noise was dance music, and they quickly chose patterns and began to dance like this. Old Don Antonio stood up and did a dance step where you stand first on one foot and then on the other. But as it turned out, the noise wasn't music or a dance. It was just noise, and you couldn't dance well to it or stay happy. Then the great gods stopped and listened carefully because they wanted to know what the noise was saying, but they couldn't make anything out because it was just noise. And since you can't dance to noise, the first gods, the ones who gave birth to the world, couldn't walk anymore because they couldn't only walk by dancing. They were sad at having to stop because the first gods were avid walkers, the first ones. And if one of the gods tried to walk or dance to the noise by himself, he couldn't because he'd lose his step and run into the others, tripping and falling over rocks and trees and hurting himself. Don Antonio stopped to relight the cigarette the rain and noise had put out. After the flame came the smoke, and after the smoke came the word. Then the gods looked for silence. To do so, they couldn't get their bearings again, but they couldn't find it anywhere. They didn't know where silence could have gone to, and the gods came desperately to not finding the silence that kept the path. So in an assembly of gods, they came to an agreement. It was very difficult because of all that noise, but they finally agreed that each one should look for a quiet place to find himself. They looked high, they looked low, they looked around, but they couldn't find any. Finally, since there wasn't any other place left to find silence, they looked inside themselves. And when they looked for silence, there they found it, and found one another, and found their path again. Those great gods who gave birth to the world, the first ones. Old Don Antonio was silent, and the rain was silent too, and it was a short silence. Quickly the crickets came, ripping that night of 10 years passed into little pieces. Dawn was on the mountain when old Don Antonio said goodbye with, "Well, I have arrived." I remained smoking little pieces of silence that Dawn had abandoned on the mountains of this Mexican Southeast. All right, 92. I don't even know what time it is. All right, plenty of time. Making the bread called tomorrow, July 1997. Old Don Antonio used to say that the ingredients needed to bake bread when called tomorrow are many. One of them is pain, Don Antonio adds, now while he piles firewood up next to the oven. We got out into an afternoon, shimmering after one of those rains that July used to paint the earth green. Donna Juaneta has stayed behind, preparing the sweet cornbread that around here they called marquanzecto. Can't say it. The loaf shaped by its sardine can baked pan. I don't know how long Don Antonio or Donna Juaneta have been together, and I have never asked. Today in this jungle afternoon, Don Antonio speaks about pain as an ingredient of hope, and Donna Juaneta bakes him a loaf of bread to prove it. For several nights, illness has troubled Donna Juaneta. Juanita's sleep, and Don Antonio's unable to sleep in his devotion to her, relieves her pain with stories and games. This very dawn, old Don Antonio had set up a grandiose show, playing with his hands with the light from the hearth. He created a multitude of shadow puppets, jungle animals. Don Juanita laughs at the night walking Tensconetally, at the restlessness white-tailed deer, at the horse howler monkey, at the vain peacock and the loud parrot that Don Antonio paints on the canvas of his hut. It didn't cure me, but I laughed a lot. Donna Juanita tells me, I didn't know the shadows were so happy. After Donna Juanita bakes the marquesato from Don Antonio, not to thank him for the useless medicine during the night of joyful shadows, and she didn't bake it to make him happy either. She baked it as evidence that a pain shared brings relief, and cast a joyful shadow. That's why Don and Juanita bakes bread in her hands, and Don Antonio's firewood births inside an old sardine can. And so that it shouldn't go to waste, we ate the evidence of Don Juanita and old Don Antonio's shared pain with some hot coffee. We ate the pain turned into shared bread and light. We are all telling you happened long ago. That is today. 93. Story of the others. It's a story after story after story. What? I don't understand it. Just looking back a little bit. Okay. Old Don Antonio used to say, life without those who are different is empty and damns you to stagnation. What does this have to do with the intercontinental struggle for humanity and against neoliberalism? Well, in order to explain it, I'd have to tell you. It's dawn again. Beneath a menacing plane, a sea tries to read a book of poems with the faint help of a tiny candle stump. I scramble a letter to someone I don't know personally, who probably speaks another language, has a different culture, is from another country, is a different color, and for sure has a different history. The plane goes by and I pause a little to listen, and then a lot more to give myself time to deal with the difficulty of writing a letter to those who are different. Just then, from out of the highland mist, unnoticed by the sea, Don Antonio appears at my side and giving me a few little taps on the shoulder, lights his cigarette and recounts the story of others. The oldest of the old, ones who settled in this land, said that the greatest gods, those who gave birth to the world, did not all think the same way. That is, they weren't all of one mind, but each felt his own thoughts, and among themselves they listened to each other and respected each other. The eldest of the elders say that that's the way it was. If it hadn't been so, the world would never have been born, because the first gods would have spent all their time fighting, since the thoughts they felt were different. The eldest of the elders say that's why the world came up with so many shapes and colors, so many as the thoughts the greatest gods had. 7 were the greatest gods. 7 were the thoughts each one of them had, and 7 times 7 were the shapes and colors in which they dressed the world. Old Don Antonio tells me that he asked the eldest of the elders how the first gods were able to come to an agreement and talk to each other if the thoughts they felt were so different. Old Don Antonio recounts that the eldest of the elders told him there was a meeting between the 7 gods and the 7 different thoughts each one had, and that at that meeting they came to an agreement. The eldest of the elders told Don Antonio that the assembly of the first gods, those who gave birth to the world, was a long time before yesterday, that it happened when there was not yet time. And they said that during that assembly, each one of the first gods said his piece, and then they all said, "My thoughts are different than those of others." Then the gods were quiet for a bit and realized that when each one of them said the others, they were talking about others as different. After they had been quiet for a while, the first gods realized that they already had a first agreement, that there were others, and that those others were different, and that who each one was. So the first agreement, the very first gods had, was to recognize difference and accept the existence of the other. And what else could they do anyway? Since they were all gods, first they had to accept this, because there wasn't one who was more or less than the other. They were different, and that is how they had to move along. After this first agreement came the decision, because it's one thing to recognize that there are others who are different and very different things to respect them. So they spent quite a while talking and discussing just how one was different from the other. And they didn't mind spending a lot of time talking about it because there was no time yet. Afterward, they all kept quiet, and each one of them spoke about his difference. And each of the other gods who were all listening realized that by listening and learning about the difference of the other, he could understand better what was different in him. Then they were very happy and started to dance. They danced for a long time, but they didn't care because that time didn't exist. After the dance, the gods agreed it's a good thing that there are others who are different and that one must listen to them too, know oneself. After the agreement, they went to sleep, tired from so much dancing. These first gods who gave birth to the world didn't tire from talking because it so happened that they were very good at talking, but they were just beginning to learn how to listen. I didn't notice when Don Antonio left. The sea was already sleeping, and a shapeless spot of wax was all that was left of the little candle stump up above the sky, beginning thinning its blackness with the morning light. 94. The Tale of the Lion in the Mirror. July 1998. Don Antonio says that, let me see what time it is. Almost time. Don Antonio says that when he was young, his father, Don Antonio, taught him to kill a lion without a gun. Don Antonio says that when he was young, Antonio and his father was old on Don Antonio. His father told him the story that he now whispers in my ear, so the sea will only be able to learn it's from my lips. The story of the lion and the mirror. First, the lion tears. It tears its prey apart. Then he drinks the blood, eats the heart, and leaves the rest for the vultures. There's nothing that can overwhelm the lion's strength. There's no animal that can confront him, nor any man who doesn't flee from him. Only a force just as brutal, bloodthirsty, and powerful can defeat a lion. The old Don Antonio then rolled his cigarette and pretended to mind the logs, forming the bright star of the campfire flames, looking out of the corner of his eyes at the young Antonio. He didn't have to wait long before the young Antonio asked him And what is the force great enough to defeat a lion? The old Don Antonio handed the young Antonio a mirror. Me, asked young Antonio. Look at himself in the round mirror. Old Don Antonio smiled, good humorously. That is what the young Antonio says, and took the mirror for himself. No, not you, he responded. By showing you the mirror, I meant the strength which can defeat the lion is the lion's own strength. Only the lion himself can defeat the lion. Ah, asked young Antonio, just to be saying something. Old Don Antonio understood that young Antonio hadn't understood a thing, so he went on with his story. When we understood that only the lion could defeat a lion, we began to think of how to make the lion confront himself. The eldest of the elders in the community said that you had to know the lion, and they named one boy to get to know him. You? Interrupted the young Antonio. Old Don Antonio. Silence became his confirmation, and after arranging the logs on the fire, he continues, they took the boy up to the top of the Ceiba and left a tied up calf at its base, and they went away. The boy was supposed to watch what the lion did with the calf, wait for the lion to go away, and then return to the community to tell them what he'd seen. For the lion to go away. And that is what he did. The lion came, killed, tore the calf apart, and afterward he drank its blood, ate its heart, and left as the buzzards were circling and waiting for their turn. The boy went back to the community and told them what he'd seen. The eldest of the elders thought for a while and said, let the death the predator inflict be his death. And they gave the boy a mirror, some nails, and a calf. Tomorrow will be the night for justice, said the elders, and they went back to their thoughts. The young boy did not understand. He went to his hut and stayed there for a good while watching the fire, and that's where he was when his father came to ask him what was happening. The boy told him everything. The boy's father sat silently next to him, and after a while he spoke. The boy began to smile as he listened to his father. The next day, when the afternoon had already turned to gold and the gray of night had disappeared itself over the treetops, the boy left the community and walked to the Ceiba, carrying the calf. When he reached the foot of the mother tree, he killed the calf and took out his heart. Then he broke the mirror into lots of pieces and stuck the pieces into the heart with some of the blood. Then he opened the heart again and put a nail inside. He put the heart back in the calf's chest and made the frame with stakes to keep the calf on its feet as if it were still alive. The boy climbed up the top of the tree and waited there above, while the night let itself fall from the trees to the ground. He remembered his father's words, the saying, death the predator inflicts. It was night when the lion returned. The animal approached and with one leap attacked the calf and tore it apart. When he licked the heart, the lion became suspicious because the blood was dry, but the broken mirror shards cut his tongue and made it bleed. The lion thought the blood was his own, blood from his own mouth was the calf's heart. Excited, he chewed up the whole heart. The nail made him bleed even more, but the lion still thought the blood in his mouth was the calf's. He chewed it, and he chewed, and more. The lion cut himself, and more he bled, and the more he bled, the more he chewed. The lion kept chewing until he bled to death. The boy returned with the lion's claws strung in the necklace, and he showed it to the elders and the elders in the community. They smiled and told him, it isn't the claw you should keep as a trophy of the victory, but the mirror. That's how old Don Antonio says the lion killed himself. But along with the mirror, old Don Antonio always carries his old flint rifle. just in case the lion doesn't know his history. He tells him, smiling and winking an eye. On my other side, the sea adds, in case the lion doesn't know. Fishing in the waters. Don and Jesus. So many stories. Old Don Antonio tells a story that the eldest of his community once told him. He says once upon a time there was a very little beautiful fish who lived in the river. The lion saw the fish and had a sudden craving for it. But when the lion reached the river, he realized that he couldn't swim and get to the fish. So the lion asked the opossum for advice, told him, it's very simple. Fish can't live out of water. All you have to do is drink all the water out of the river. The fish will be left high and dry, and when you catch him and eat him. The lion was very pleased with the opossum's advice and rewarded him with a position in his kingdom. The lion went to the edge of the river and began to drink. He died when all the water burst him into pieces. The opossum became unemployed. 10-10. 95. The story of the measures of memory. August 1998. Nothing new around here. An abundance of planes and helicopters, promising war, rains promise, sowing, and indignities which promise a future. The children continue being children. The little Pedretto was rebaptized me as Up, an easy abbreviation of SUP, as I understand. While he tries to find out if my pipe is made of chocolate, just like some cigarettes he had been given. While the sea dreams with me in the womb, I remember that in the next few days, August 28th, the ladies will be celebrating the 20th anniversary of an act which, like everything that comes from below, began small and then grew. 20 years ago, a group of determined and inconvenient for the power, women and men began a hunger strike, demanding the liberation of political prisoners and an accounting of the disappeared. We and others without memory owe these women of foolish tenderness many things. One of these things, and not the only one, is that tomorrow that is and has been promised us by those, like the ladies, know that memory does not rest nor yield, and that dignity has no age or size. And then old Don Antonio comes with a gift for the sea, and he recounts just for the sake of recounting the history of measuring memory. The eldest of our elders tells that the first gods, those who gave birth to the world, parceled out memory among the men and women who walked in the world. Memories of God is good, the greatest gods said and told, because it is a mirror that helps us understand the present and promise the future. The first gods measure out memory with a small cup in order to parcel it out, and every man and woman came to receive the measure of memory. But some of the men and women were large than the others, so the measure of memory seemed not equal to the rest. In the smaller person's memory shone clearly, and in the larger person it was made opaque. That's why it is said that memory is greatest and strongest in small people and is difficult to find in powerful. That is why they also say that men and women become smaller and smaller when they grow old, so that memory will shine more brightly. They say that it is the work of the eldest of the elders to make memory great. And they also say that dignity is nothing more than the memory that lives. That's what they say. 96. The story of one and all. So many stories. So many stories. What's going on here? No, don't do that. Stay up there. Okay. The story of one and all. December 1998. It was a dawn in December, and December mountain dawns are cold and rainy. The fog clings to the trees, giving them new shape and shadows. So I am keeping watch over the solitary smoke ring of my pipe, hoping that maybe the sea will come and will give harbor to the cloud issuing from my lips. When the form frees itself from a nearby tree, and I half hear, quote, wisdom does not consist not knowing many things, or in knowing much about one thing. I tremble partly with a cold, partly from the fog, but mostly from what I hear, and even more from surprise at recognizing old Don Antonio by a brief lightning flash of his match at his creased cigarette. I do what I usually do in these cases. I rub my knees, clench my pipe, and say a wise, Old Don Antonio sits by me, fixing his cigarette in the corner of his mouth, and muttering gives shape, color, and warmth to the story of one and all. Once there was a time when there was no time, and was the time of the beginning. It was about dawn. It was neither night or nor day. Time was just there, without going anywhere or coming from any place. There was no light, but it wasn't dark either. It was the time when the great gods were alive, the ones who gave birth to the world, the very first ones. The eldest of all our elders say that those first gods were 7, and each was 2. The eldest of our elders say that 7 is the number that ancients used for the whole, and that 1 is always 2, so as to be able to walk together. That's why they say that the very first gods were born wise and great. They were small, and they weren't many of them, but they sure talked. They sure talked a lot and talked to themselves a lot. Those first gods were full of hot air. They talked to themselves a lot, and they all spoke at once, so they couldn't understand each other. Although they spoke a lot, these gods didn't know very much. But who knows how or why there came a moment when they all fell silent at the same time. When one of them spoke and said, I told himself that it would be a good thing if whenever one of them and the other who didn't speak could hear him, and that what they must do is to take turns speaking. The 7 who were 2 and 1 agreed. The eldest of our elders say that was the first agreement in history, that of not just speaking, but listening. The gods looked in the corners of that dawn, when there was no day or night, or world, or men, or women, or animals, or anything yet. They looked and realized that every bit of that dawn was speaking truth, and that one person alone couldn't listen to all the nooks and crannies of it. So they divided up the job of listening to dawn. That's how they were able to learn everything that the world of that time, that wasn't yet a world, had to teach them. And that's how the first gods saw that was needed from learning and working and living and loving. But they also saw that not one, but all are needed to make the world turn. And that's how the first gods became wise, the greatest, the true gods, those who gave birth to the world. They learned how to talk to each other and how to listen. They were wise, not because they knew many things or because they knew a lot about any one thing, but because they understood that one and all are necessary and sufficient. Old Don Antonio leaves and I remain. waiting, expecting to see, and the wheat, knowing they must come because they haven't left. Let me see what time it is. 45. Let me see. I am on page 495. 495. Yep, there's plenty of time to read this next one. 495. Okay, dawn is heralding heat and flashes. May 10th, 1999. Dawn. Brothers and sisters, it is May, and the dawn is heralding heat and flashes. But it is not this May, nor this dawn. No? Well, yes, it is this May and this dawn. But it is 10 years earlier. The light from the campfire is painting shadows and lights on the walls of old Don Antonio's hut. Old Don Antonio has been silent for some time, just looking at Donna Antonio's hut. Old Don Antonio has been silent for some time, just looking at Donna Juaneta, who is looking at her hands. I am to one side, sitting in front of a cup of coffee, and it has been some time since I arrived. I came to bring old Don Antonio a deerskin to see if he knew how I could tan it. Old Don Antonio had scarcely looked at the skin. He continued to look at Donna Juaneta, looking at her hands. They were waiting for something. I mean, old Don Antonio was waiting for something from looking so long at Donna Juaneta. And Donna Juaneta was waiting for something from looking so long at her hands. I chewed on my pipe and waited as well. But of all of us who were there, I was the only one who didn't know what we were waiting for. Suddenly, Donna Juaneta sighed deeply and raised her face, a gaze to old Don Antonio, saying, "The water is coming on time." "It is coming," old Don Antonio said. And right then he took out his roller and began rolling a cigarette. I knew what that meant, so I quickly filled my pipe, lit it, and made myself comfortable in order to listen and to remember. And so now I can tell you the story of the calendar. The eldest of the elders among our people tell that during the first times time was completely disorganized, and it stumbled about like a drunk at a Santa Cruz fiesta. Men and women lost many things and lost themselves because time did not pass evenly, but rather sometimes hurried up and sometimes went slowly, dragging along almost like the old lame person. Sometimes the sun was a great skin that covered everything, and other times it was just water above, water below, water in between. Everything was absolute chaos, and one could barely hunt or fix the straw on the roofs or the sticks and mud on the walls of the huts. And the gods looked at everything, and they looked because these gods who were the very first, those who gave birth to the world, were just strolling about and catching crawfish in the river and chewing sugarcane. And sometimes they also helped separate the kernels of the maize of the tortillas. And so they looked at everything, these gods, those that gave birth to the world, the very first, and they thought, but they did not think quickly. Rather, they took a long time, because these gods were not hasty, and so they spent a long time just watching time go staggering about the land. After putting it off like that, then they did indeed think. After they had thought, then, because they also took their time in thinking, the gods called on the mama. They called on Amuka. I can't say this word. Mexican. I can't say it. They just said to her, Mama, that person's name, this time that goes about the land is not doing well. It is just skipping about. It runs and drags, sometimes ahead, sometimes backwards. And so one can absolutely not plant. And you will see that neither can they harvest when they want to. And the men and women are growing sad, and now many of us battle with each other. And in order to find the Maccabean and the sugarcane is not where they left it. And so we are telling you, we do not know what you thought, Mama, but it is not good that time just goes about like this, without anyone being able to orient themselves as to when and where they must go and what is going on. This is what we are thinking. Mama, we do not know what you are going to tell us about this problem that we are telling you about. Mama sighed for a good bit, and then she said, it is not good that time is just out of control like that, wreaking havoc and ruining things for all these good people. Yes, that is right. It is not good, said the gods, and they waited a bit because they well knew that Mama had not finished speaking. She had barely begun. That is why ever since then it seems that mamas have already finished when they have barely begun talking to us. Mama was sighing for another while when then she continued speaking. Up there in the sky is the tail that time should follow. The time will pay attention. If someone is reading the tale to it and telling it what comes next and how and when and where, if it is there and if it pays attention, said the gods. Mama sighed more and at last she said, I am willing to read time the tale so that it learns how to run straight. But my eyes are not good now, and I can scarcely look at the sky. I cannot. You cannot, said the gods. See, if I could, Mama said, then I would straighten out time. But I cannot look at I cannot look at and read the sky because my eyes are not good. Said the gods. Said Mama. And so they remained, the ones and the other just say until the gods finally began thinking again, and they said, look, Mama, we do not know what you are thinking, but we think it would be good if we brought you the sky down here below, and then you could see it up close very well and read and put aright the passing of time. And Mama sighed heavily when she said, perhaps I have some place to put the sky. No. Can you not see how small my hut is? No, said the gods. And they remained a good bit longer with their And then the gods thought once more and said, look, Mama, we do not know what you are thinking, but we think it would be good if we copied what is written in the sky and bring it to you so you can copy it and read it. And so you will set right the passing of time. That's good, said Mama. And the gods went up and they copied the tale that the sky tells in the notebook. And they came down once again and they went to see Mama with the notebook. And they said to her, look, Mama, here then is the tale that the sky tells. We wrote it down in this notebook, but it is not going to last. So you will have to copy it someplace else where the tale that will set right the passage of time and will last forever. Yes, Mama said. Copy the tale on my hand, and I will set the passage of time right so it goes straight and does not go about like an old drunk. And on the palm of the back and the palms and the backs of Mama's hand. The gods wrote the tale that is told in sky in order to set right the passage of time. And that is why knowing mamas have many lines on their hands, and they read the calendar on them, and that in that way they see that time runs straight, and the harvest that history plants in memory is not forgotten. Don Antonio is silent, and Don Juanita repeated, looking her hands. They water, the water is coming on time. See what time it is. Close enough. 5 minutes till. All right, I think we'll stop here. The story of the Milky Way, and that is $4.99. $4.99. Anybody want to come up? Talk about what we read? Hold on, I'm trying to delete. What up, Joe? What you want to talk about?
Can you hear me?
Yes. What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about the fact that these are all like the stories of the beginning. These are like their big stories. Like how they came up with the colors and the calendar and numbers and all of that. I think this is very interesting.
I would agree. They're good stories. I like it, but not my favorite. But I like this. This is okay. It's good. It's just, yeah. I think they're good stories, you know. But it's okay. It's okay. Anybody else have anything to say? Hello.
I don't really have anything else to say, but that was it. They were really good, and I enjoyed listening to the stories.
I do enjoy listening to the creation stories, even though they might be a little like tell me the moral of the story a little bit, you know. But yeah, I like them too. But we're at $4.99, and how much more do we have left? Let's find out.
Well, you remember the one where they were all talking at once? Do you remember the moral of that one?
Which one?
Where they were all talking at once.
Okay, who was all talking at once?
All the old gods were talking at one time because they'd just been made, and it wasn't until they learned to listen that they were able to get things done.
Ah, okay. I get that now. All right. Looking back real quick, hold on a second, seeing where, okay, hold on. Looks like, 41 pages left to go. Nice. All right. Yeah, I mean, they're good stories. Now I understand that, I get that. Yeah, I understood that part, you know, so it's a thing that we should do, yeah. All right, well, if no one else has, go ahead.
I said that's it.
All right. Well, if no one else has anything else to say, I'm going to go ahead and close it out. I appreciate everybody.